Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah. So let somebody tell us why we call it Eid. Why is it called Eid? Yeah, please. Bismillah.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. So I understand Eid because it's they are the prayers that we come back to year on year. So because we return to it at the same time of the year generally, that's why they are called Eid prayers.
Barakallah fiqh. So it's from the root word ada, for something to return. So something to return, to repeat, to recur. So that is why it is called Eid, that which recurs, that which repeats. That is why the tradition of the people is also called Arda, Ardatun. It is Arda because this thing that we're talking about, this practice that we're talking about, is something that is often repeated amongst the people. Maybe it's their way of dressing. Say, this is their Arda. In terms of dressing, this is what they often do. This is what they do repeatedly in terms of putting on clothes. If it is their mode of greeting, if it is their food, if it is whatever, it is something that they often do, they do repeatedly. So it has become their Arda, their tradition, their custom. So Eid also borrows from that same concept of something that returns. This is a salah that is often repeated. It's a salah that is often repeated. Of course, the 5 daily salawat too are often repeated, but this name is specific to them to set them apart from the ones that we repeat every day. This one is one that, and the one that we repeat every week, Salaat-ul. So those ones are not called Eid, even though linguistically it will be accepted, but technically the scholars have appointed these for it, and even the Prophet ﷺ. So this is our Eid, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. Eid al-Fitr after the Ramadan, and Eid al-Adha after in the months of Hajj, on the 10th day of the Hijjah to the 13th day of the Hijjah, those 4 days. Now, so the next thing is the hadith of Al-Bara ibn Azib. So now, with respect to the Eid prayers and the khutbah, which one comes first and which one last? Anybody?
Eid prayer comes before the khutbah.
The prayer comes before the khutbah. But is it permissible to do the khutbah first and the prayer last? Anybody?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
Yes, we know that it is the Eid prayers, you do the salah first, you observe the salah first, then you follow it up with a khutbah. So my question is, yes, we know this, but then is it haram to do the khutbah first and then do the what do you call it, the salah afterwards?
There was no, I mean, at least in the class, I don't recall us saying any occasion where we have such a situation where khutbah comes before salah.
But as is reported in this hadith, also the hadith of Rasul that always the salat precedes the khutbah is the usual habit of the Prophet ﷺ, that the khutbah precedes the salat precedes the khutbah.
Okay. The salah precedes the khutbah, meaning that we are not permitted to do the khutbah before the salah. I just want something definitive.
Can you repeat that again, please?
Are we saying categorically that we cannot observe, that we cannot deliver the khutbah before observing the salah of Eid?
Yes.
Yes, we are saying that because we don't have any report of it having been done before.
Okay. Barakallahu fikum. Now we are correct. So the khutbah must always come after the salah. This is what we have evidence for. 1 second, please. Now, so this is what the companion of the Prophet ﷺ reported in all the narrations, with us. And it wasn't until after the... Now, Madam Mujib, go on.
Assalamu alaikum. Doctor, you're probably about to see what I was getting at, which is that I wanted to ask that could there be a possibility among the things that our righteous scholars have discussed, that maybe it can be excusable that having the salah before, having the khutbah before the salah, the following Jumu'ah, might be excusable because of the fact that in the story, in the narration of of some companions, that one of these caliphs who led the prayer by giving the speech before the salah, and a companion called him to attention of the error in that, but his excuse was that people don't wait, and the companion said what he knew, which was the sunnah, was better than what he's just saying, and that there's I don't remember learning in that story that the companions, for instance, had to repeat that Jumu'ah. Had to repeat that khutbah because of the error that was there. So for that one reason, as well as the fact that on situations where Jumu'ah and Eid coincide, one takes the place of the other, is there a possibility that the scholars can use it as a means to think that it can be excusable, maybe the order, in as much as it's sunnah and possibly sunnah mu'akkada, not sure if it's wajib or not, can be excusable? I just wanted to ask about that. I'm not sure we've ever talked about that.
Now, barakallahu fiik. I think it was Marwan that delivered the khutbah before the Eid, and the reason he gave was that the people were no longer waiting to listen to the khutbah. Now, when the deen, two wrongs do not make a right. And in this case, the more correct opinion is that the Eid Salah is Sunnah al-Mu'akkada, is an emphasized Sunnah. The scholars differ, as we've said, regarding it. We said that the more correct opinion is that it is Sunnah al-Mu'akkada, because a companion came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him about the things that were compulsory on him. And the Prophet ﷺ went from one topic to the other, and one of the things he talked about was Salah. He told him 5 daily Salah are compulsory on you. The man asked, is there any other salah that is compulsory on me? He said, no, except you want to do tatawwa, except you want to do something non-obligatory, supererogatory. So from this and other, supporting evidences, we see that any salah after the 5 daily prayers, once we don't find additional text that talks about its compulsion, then it is sunnah. In this case, the sunnah mu'akkada, because the Prophet ﷺ always, always did it. Those who say it is compulsory, they say that, but the Prophet ﷺ asked, according to the hadith of Atiyah, that asked that women who are even menstruating should come to the mosque, to the Eid ground rather, but they will not be in the musalla where the people will pray, they will be behind. Is that not proof that it is compulsory? So the scholars who hold the opinion that it's sunnah and mu'akkada, they say that when the women came, did they observe salah? Because the topic we are talking about is whether the salah is compulsory or not. Salaat-ul, whether it is compulsory or not. He said no, they didn't. They didn't observe the salah. So calling people that are not going to get something done to do that thing is not what happened, but rather to witness the occasion and the Muslims gathering together and observing their salah is what the Prophet ﷺ did. Now, whenever the Prophet ﷺ asks people to do something, it could mean that it is compulsory and it could mean that it is mustahab. It could mean either of the two. Now, the hadith of the man who came to learn the deen, and the Prophet ﷺ told him that 5 daily prayers is what is compulsory on him, lets us know that Salaat-ul Eedain is not part of the compulsory ones. We need a clear-cut hadith that will say the ones who have observed this do not need, the ones who do not observe Salaat-ul Eid have committed a sin. Then we will have evidence for, for that being compulsory. So now, if why we went this way is to know the ruling on the Salaat-ul Eid. The ruling on Salaat-ul Eid is that it is Sunnah al-Mu'akkada. The ruling on the Eid khutbah is Sunnah, because the Prophet ﷺ will give the khutbah and will say whoever wants to listen should stay, giving permission for those who didn't want to listen to go. So it is mustahab, not compulsory. So therefore, so it is mustahab, not compulsory. So if the salah is sunnah al-mu'akkada, emphasize mustahab, and the khutbah is mustahab, and the Prophet ﷺ never gave the khutbah of the Eid before the salah, then we'll see that one aspect being invalid does not affect the other, because it is not a shart for it. Because it is not a shart for it. If it was a shart for it, then that is when the khutbah being said at the wrong time, for instance, if the time or the placement of the khutbah relative to the salah was a shart, a condition for the validity of the salah, that will come after it, then that is when, you know, the salah being valid or not will be an issue. But in this case, that's not but that's not the case in this you know, example. So the companion, sorry, Marwan, who said the khutbah before, he did something that was not from the sunnah. He did something that was not from the sunnah. So if anything, the most that can be said is with respect to the khutbah, that is not a valid khutbah. And what's the ruling of khutbah? It is mustahab. So no, and what does mustahab mean? That if which you do, you get rewarded. But if you abandon or do wrongly, or if you abandon, then there's no punishment for it. So that is the khutbah in and of itself. What he was liable for was the act of putting it before the salah. The salah itself was observed with no incident, so the salah is valid. So there are two independent things when it comes to Salatul Eedain. When it comes to Salatul Eedain, unlike Jumu'ah, if somebody observes the one khutbah, for instance, instead of two khutbahs, then that salat is not going to be valid because they are linked together. Or somebody observes the salat first before the khutbah, because in the case of Jumu'ah, it is a compulsory salah for the one who is not excused for observing Jumu'ah, like the women, like the child, like the slave, according to some opinion of the scholars, like the traveler. If you don't have an excuse, then Salatul Jumu'ah is a compulsory salah. It is a compulsory salah. And if you have an excuse not to observe Salatul Jumu'ah, then you must observe Salatul Dhuhr. But in the case of Eid, if you don't observe Salatul Eid, there's nothing else upon you. There's nothing else upon you. So they don't carry the same consequence, because their rulings are different and all that. Now, does that answer your question? Madam Mujib?
Yes, very, very, very much enlightening and much clearer. Jazakallah khairan.
Wa alaikum. Barakallahu fiik. So now, what is the ruling with respect to Salatul with respect to the Eid for someone, or rather, let me put it this way: when is it valid and when is it invalid to slaughter an animal for the Eid al-Adha?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It is invalid to slaughter before the Eid prayers.
Okay.
And it is valid to slaughter on the day of Eid and the 3 days of Tashriq.
Okay.
So, and if you slaughter after those days, then it's no longer a slaughter that is meant for the Eid.
Okay. Barakallahu fikum. Jazakumullah khair. Does anybody want to add to that? Is there any other time that the animal slaughtered can be valid?
Doctor, the only addition, more like a qualification really that comes to my mind is around discussions from when the validity of the slaughter begins on the day of Eid. Because I don't know if that's worthy of adding or just.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I meant that, like, rather than an additional time, like the only thing that comes to mind is like descriptions of the different views, if I might say, of when the correct time to begin the slaughter for Eid, when it commences.
No.
That's the only thing that comes to mind. I don't know if that's what you are looking for or something else.
Okay. Barakallahu fiqh. Barakallahu fiqh. It was Abu Sa'id, Al-Khudri, that was a companion, went against what Marwan did when he gave the khutbah before the Salah. The animal slaughtered for Eid is valid anytime on the days that were listed, from the 10th day of Dhul Hijjah to the 13th day of Dhul Hijjah, till just before Maghrib on the 13th day of Dhul Hijjah. That's the last day of the Ayyam Tashriq. It is valid if it is slaughtered anytime after the Salah, even before the khutbah, even before the Imam slaughters his own. I think that was what we learned, right? So, however, the Sunnah is to slaughter it after the khutbah, because that is when the Prophet ﷺ will slaughter his own. How we know this is that the Prophet ﷺ told us that the one who slaughters after the Salah, he didn't say after the khutbah, one who slaughters after the Salah has slaughtered for the Eid. However, the one who slaughters before the Salah, then it is only meat, for his own consumption. So the Salah is the signpost. So someone who wants to make haste, the maximum he can do is that after Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah of the Salah, he can slaughter his animal. But the best is for him to wait until the khutbah is finished. That is the khutbah at the Eid grounds where he observes his Salah. The khutbah at the Eid ground where he observes his Salah, because time where the Eid observed differs from place to place. And this wasn't much of a problem during the early days of Islam, because there were multiple places where people observed the Eid ground. There will just be one place. There was only one place. The people will go to the outskirts of the town where the Eid grounds will be, and they will observe, as a community, they will all observe it there. So there will only be one reference with respect to when have they finished the Salah or not, when have they finished the khutbah or not. So, but now that we have people praying everywhere, then the mosque or the prayer ground rather that you would observe your once they finish the Salah, and you slaughter, the meat will be the slaughtering will be valid for Eid. However, it is best to follow the Sunnah and wait till the khutbah has been concluded. And the khutbah, of course, shouldn't be long, and it should be something concise and brief, So it's nothing much to wait for. Barakallahu fikum. So on that, we just read the hadith of Bara bin Azib on that. It said, "Khatabana Nabiyyu sallallahu alayhi wasallam." The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave us a khutbah on Yam al-Eid, ba'da salah, after the salah. Faqala, and he said, "Man salla salatana wa nasaka nusukana faqad asaba nusuk." Whoever prayed our prayer and slaughtered like we did, then he has hit the sunnah. وَمَنْ نَسَكَ قَبْلَ الصَّلَاةِ فَلَا نُسُكَ لَهُ. Whoever slaughters before the salah, then there's no rites, ritual of slaughtering for him, i.e. his slaughtering is not valid. It's not acceptable. When he said this, فَقَالَ Abu Burda ibn Niyar, Abu Burda said, and he was the maternal uncle of Al-Bara ibn Azib. He said, "Inni nasaktu shati qabla salah." I slaughtered my own sheep before the salah. فَعَرَفْتُ أَنَّ الْيَوْمِ يَوْمُ الْأَكْلِ وَالشُّرْبِ. I knew that today is the day of eating and drinking. وَأَحْبَبْتُ أَن تكون شأتي أول يذبح في بيتي. And I wanted my sheep to be the first to be slaughtered in my house. فذبحت شأتي. Therefore I slaughtered my sheep. فتغديت قبل أن آتي الصلاة. And I ate out of it before I came for the salah. قال شاتك شات اللحم. Prophet ﷺ said, your sheep is only for its meat. It is not for the festival. It's not for Eid. Doesn't qualify. Then he said, Ya Rasulullah, فَإِنَّ عِنْدَنَا عَنَاقٍ. We have a less than 2-year-old sheep with us in the house. وَإِيَا حَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِنْ شَاتِينَ. And it is more beloved to me than 2 sheep. Afatujzi ani, will it, count if I were to slaughter it? Qala na'am. The Prophet ﷺ said yes. Walan yujziya an ahadin ba'dak. But it will not be counted for anyone other than you, so anyone after you. So this restricted the permission to only one person, and that was it. Now let's go to the next hadith. The hadith of Jundub ibn AbduLlaah said, the Prophet ﷺ said, Yawm al-Nahar, Salla Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam Yawma Nahar, Thumma khataba, Thumma dabaha. So that's how the Prophet ﷺ did it. Said the Prophet ﷺ on Eid al-Adha, he gave the salah, then he gave the khutbah, then, and that is thereafter, he slaughtered the animal. And waqal, and he said, Man dabaha qabla an yusalli fal yadhbah makanaha. Whoever slaughtered before observing the salah, then he should do a repeat, slaughter another animal in its place. Why? From what he said in the previous hadith, because the previous slaughtering was only for meat. Like if you are slaughtered for meat any other day other than the Eid. If you want the reward for slaughtering for the Eid, then you need to repeat. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَذْبَحْ فَلْيَذْبَحْ فَمَنْ لَمْ يَذْبَحْ فَلْيَذْبَحْ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ. And anyone who has not yet slaughtered, then it should, when he is slaughtering, should slaughter within the name of Allah. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. The next hadith. Now, before we go there, the scholars differed whether the slaughtering is compulsory or it is mustahab. Some of the scholars say it is compulsory because of the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Salaat-ul Kawthar, fasalli li rabbika wanhar, and observe the salat and do your nahar. But we said that the salah itself is mustahab, sunnah and mu'akkada, and emphasize sunnah and emphasize mustahab. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so this is an encouragement, and it's not limited to Eid al-Adha alone. Whenever you're going to do nahar, when you're going to slaughter an animal, do it in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, Madam Mujib.
Yes, sir. So regarding this status, the mashru' status of slaughtering, which is sunnah mu'akkada. Now, there's this narration that usually was commonly shared, and the last I really double checked, I found it to be valid. And let me also double check again with you that Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma, they used to avoid slaughtering on some years so as to show people that it wasn't something that was mandatory on them by all means. So the question I want to ask, if that is true, and as well as the fact that slaughtering is sunnah mu'akkada, in following the ways of those rightly guided Khulafa al-Rashidun, where can we apply this? Like, what situation can I be in to follow them on this thing that I might be able to slaughter, but to teach people something, I would then avoid it? That's like, as laymen that we are for the most part, how can we follow them on this?
No, barakallah fiqh. Barakallah fiqh. This is that hadith is, or that athar rather, is correct. A hadith is that which, as in its popular usage, as the scholars will say, la mushahata fi istilah. In terminology, in the employment of terminology, there's no hard and fast rule in it. So what is important isn't the terminology in most cases, but rather the meaning of that terminology. So the terminologies I'm going to say now, I'm presenting them, or I'll be presenting them, inshallah, based on their most common usage. What is most common amongst the scholars? Hadith is that which is reported from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, either what he said, what he did, what he was silent, what he gave his silent approval on, or a description of his person or his actions. This is a hadith. Athar is that which was narrated from other than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereas khabar is a mixture of the two. If you say khabar, it could mean hadith, it could mean athar. Okay, so these are just technical definitions from the scholars. There are specific scholars who choose other terminologies rather other than these. There are scholars who will use khabar to mean hadith and things like this, but the most common are these three. So the athar of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is correct, and some of the other companions, that they sometimes would, we know Abu Bakr was a wealthy man, very wealthy. So, but sometimes will not. So, meaning why that comes up about his wealth is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Man kana lahu sa'a," whoever has the means. Man kana lahu sa'a, whoever has the means to slaughter, that is, then walam yadih fala yaqribanna musallana. Whoever has the means to slaughter and he doesn't slaughter, he should not come close to our mosque. This, therefore, is what's an encouragement. First, we know that the slaughtering is Sunnah Mu'akkada. So this is an emphasis on the need to slaughter. If it was that slaughtering was compulsory, then this hadith would be, interpreted to mean evidence for, slaughtering the animal. And so that is it. So Abu Bakr and some of the companions will have the means, and yet they will not slaughter, to emphasize or to let the people know that slaughtering is not compulsory. Because the way of the deen is that when it is not delineated, when its boundaries are not marked, the way of the deen is that when its boundaries are not marked, the people will begin to lose memory of what is right and what is not. It's not only the deen, it's even any practice, really. Pick a practice that people used to do, whether in the deen or outside of the deen. You will find that if people are allowed to contribute towards it, after a couple of years, you will see that what you had years back is not what you have now. Whilst in the field of worldly activities, this is permissible. Once it doesn't contradict, the change doesn't contradict the Sharia. In the Sharia, it is not permissible for there to be a change. It is tawqifi. It is we hear and we obey. This is the Sharia. We do it just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instructed that it be done. Just as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has instructed that it has been done. So if there are people in the community, people who, if they do or don't do something, they are doing that thing or not doing it will carry, the news will spread, the effect will be felt, then they are not like the rest of us. They are not like the rest of us. So for these people, Allah has placed them in the position to be people who will clear the boundaries and make the lines visible for the people. So if there's one brother something somewhere, there's one brother AbduLlaah somewhere, nobody knows him, and it's time for Eid, and he says, I want to follow what Abu Bakr did, then there won't be an impact in what he did. There won't be an impact in what he did. Maybe he's even living in the land of the kuffar. There aren't Muslims around and things like this. So his not slaughtering will not have an impact. The people don't even know that you're supposed to slaughter in the first place. They're not Muslims. But if you are living, it will be most impactful if you do it in a situation congruent to what Abu Bakr and the other companions saw or lived in. And that is, you have Muslims that have a lot of zeal for their religion, and they are practicing something, and you fear that if you do not delineate it, it will turn to being they will assume that it has become something compulsory, such that somebody who doesn't do it will be looked down upon. This is the same thing that the Prophet ﷺ did, although there's a slight difference, with respect to the Taraweeh. The difference there is that that was during a time where revelation was still descending, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have made it compulsory for the people. When he came out once, they joined him. Second day, third day, after that, he didn't come out. for fear that it will be made compulsory. But apart from that difference, it is also a demarcator that this thing is not compulsory. That this thing is not compulsory. He also did something similar with i'tikaf. When he put his tent in the mosque, the first wife came, another one came, he packed his tent and went. It's not compulsory. So don't turn it from, don't remove it from where it is, where Allah has placed it. That which is compulsory, leave it as compulsory. That which is not compulsory, don't leave it as not compulsory. This is why the scholars also frown on someone observing a nafil salah that is not a rotiba every time. A rotiba, like 2 rakas before Fajr, 2 or 4 before Madhur, 2 or 4 after Dhuhr. You know, these are rawatib. The Prophet ﷺ used to observe them all the time, except when he was on journeys. So therefore, we have evidence for this. They are nawafil, but they are rawatib. It is mustahab not only to observe them, but to observe them all the time. Then there are sunnahs that the Prophet ﷺ will observe sometimes, he won't observe sometimes. So for the one who wants to institute the sunnah, what he should do and call to and make people see him doing is to do them sometimes and not do them sometimes. So back to Abu Bakr, if we find that kind of situation where we're in the land of the Muslims are zealous about, you know, their deen, even if it is a community within a general, you know, country where that is the situation of the people, then if we want to teach, it will be an impactful one that say, Ustaz, you didn't slaughter this breed. Say yes. You should have told us. We will have, we'll have bought, around for you. No, I have the means to buy. In fact, I bought for somebody else. That's, on the same day, but just that I didn't slaughter. Why? Then because blah, 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 blah. Now educate the person. Okay. But it is good, it is mustahab to slaughter. I just wanted us to be able to know the limits and not blur them, not obfuscate them. So that's it. But if you are in a place where they are Muslims, you won't know that they are Muslims until Eid, when they'll buy their rams, the biggest ram, in the whatever. It's an act of ibadah. If it does it with, with sincerity, to be accepted from him, So if you now water down that again, it's another -1 out of his many minuses of things he doesn't do in the deen. You say, where's my one? Even the Imam himself did not slaughter. So let me remove this one too. It's also not compulsory. So that's, the wisdom that one will put towards implementing, this. So if you're in a place where people are lax about doing it, then the goal of Abu Bakr was to set the limits. So when people are lax about it, then let them know that this thing is sunnah and mu'akkada. It's not something to be lax about. If you're in a place where people want to turn sunnah al-mu'akkada to compulsory, then you don't slaughter. Say, this thing is not compulsory. Don't move it up from where Allah has placed it. So the goal behind what Abu Bakr did is what, we should, follow, not the act that was employed. Because that goal will be achieved with that act or with another act, depending on where this, the situation that one finds oneself in. Now, Barakallahu Fik. Is that, does that answer your question?
Yeah, Doctor, it very much does. Jazakallah khairan kathiran. And Doctor, maybe after class, I have some 2 related follow-up questions to this same topic, especially things you touched on.
Let's benefits. Let's benefits.
Okay.
If it's related.
The thing is, what you said about people starting to be taking something compulsory reminds me of two things. One, an example that I heard from one person, which I hope to benefit from your experience and knowledge about, the Muslims' history generally might, validate that story. This first one is that there was an experience in the madrasa where we had one of the afars liking to ask for money and stuff, and some of the students in our class used to just try to gather some money. And the suggestion came up that why don't we just have an amount that we just gather for the man instead of just coming randomly, needing transportation money, and we'll be gathering for him. And in the keep of that class, may Allah bless him because he's late now, and grant him blessings in his grave. He told me then that this idea of gathering some money, fixing it for him, is actually the basis for what is common in some madaris in our southwest now, where the scholars they feel entitled to collect money from some students. The thing having started with people just thinking out of their goodness to donate to charity, usually for the imams, but later on it became a thing that the affairs now mandate that you must do, or else people are bad students, or they could even take other means to it. I just wanted to ask if this kind of story that Nakib mentioned as a fact from history, if you also know about this. And the second thing that I also find related is the fact that I know some of our people from Southwest, Yoruba specifically, as far as I know, we have this mindset that Hajj is something that once you go once, going more than once is ashiju, as we call it, or going overboard. That what is upon you should now be to sponsor others to be going, and you'll be getting the reward for their going. And I understand that from the Salaf, and even from our not too far Salaf, in terms of the likes of Sheikh Al-Albani and scholars like that, that they went for Hajj as much as they could have gone. So it's not something that they see in that way. Not like they are saying they won't sponsor people for Hajj, but that mindset I've understood, Allahu Alam, from some of our people, that Hajj once is just what is required, going more than once is a schedule, just sponsor others. I wanted to ask you just, these are just some things in the mind. Especially that first question about the history, how true is that? And this second issue about Hajj, I just thought I should mention it. I don't know if it's a beneficial question or addition. Does that come up here?
Barakallahu fiqh. Well, the second one is easy in a few sentences. When Allah asks you to do a thing in the Sharia, the basis, as the scholars of fiqh, but also the fiqh say, is that you do it once. Like Allah says, وَأَقِيمِ الصَّلَاةَ لِذِكْرِ, and observe Salah in my remembrance. So if this was the only text in the Quran with respect to it, then what will be compulsory is for one to observe Salah once. Once one has observed Salah once, then it will have met this mark. However, that statement does not say that, does not restrict you to observing it once. It only holds you responsible for observing it less than once. Once you observed it once, you have met the mark. Anything more than that is mustahab. So for Hajj, also is like this. What is compulsory is that when one has the means, Hajj is compulsory for him once in a lifetime. If he does it more than once, then this is mustahab that he's doing. There's no problem with that. Once he doesn't hold the opinion or believe that observing it more than once is compulsory, like we talked about with the case of the udhiyah, the animal to be slaughtered for Eid. Once he doesn't hold the opinion that it is compulsory to do Hajj every year or to do Hajj more than once, he holds the opinion that it is mustahab, then labas, let him do it as frequently as Allah gives him the opportunity to. Let him sponsor others as Allah gives him the means, to. Anyone who says anything to the contrary, then upon him is the evidence. So this is a deen of evidence. As Ibn Sirin said, he said, "Walaw al-isnad min din," the chain of transmitters, i.e. of authentic narration, is part and parcel of this deen of ours. وَلَوْ الْإِسْنَادْ لَقَالَ مَنْ شَاءَ مَا شَاءَ. If not for the isnad, the chain of transmission of authentic narrations, then whoever will have said whatever. So anybody is free to say whatever he wants to say, but what we'll ask is, bring us your evidence. So anyone who says that sponsoring people to go on Hajj is better than going on Hajj oneself, then should bring the dalil. Should bring the dalil. Should bring the dalil. Now, with respect to the first question, one, I want to answer the question independent of the brother, the verdict of the brother who gave you his opinion, even though you didn't mention his name or anything. I just want to answer it independent of what he said. With that, we have a very big problem. The person speaking and all of us generally, except for a few that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has helped. And what is this problem? The problem is the value that we attach to knowledge of the deen. We have a big problem with it. A gargantuan problem. And if we are not able to solve this problem, we will continue to lose a lot as we are currently losing. We'll continue to lose a lot as we are currently losing. And everybody that is a stakeholder is involved. Let us start with the recipients of the knowledge. The recipients of the knowledge are the people, students of knowledge, the general people who are in need of those who have the knowledge and can transmit it. They need the knowledge from them in order to be able to practice their deen. They want to know, is this permissible? Is that not permissible? These people do mostly, the default, not everybody, not all the time, but the defaults, what is common amongst the people is that they want to get this knowledge without making an investment for it. But when it comes to worldly activities, they know that they have to pay to acquire this knowledge. They know they have to put effort in order to acquire this knowledge. So they send their kids, let me stop using the word they, we send our kids to the best of schools. Not only because of the contents of what will be or the content that is taught in those schools, but also because of the people they will mix with. There are schools where you won't be admitted if your father is a nobody, even if he has money, because they want to lay a foundation where the children of the crème de la crème interact with themselves, so that if they grow up like that from primary school to secondary school, they will enter the same type of universities. And when they get into the workforce, that's, community continues to survive. If you need something in that industry, there's engineer so and so, they're going to meet him. It was my classmate. You need something in law, judge so and so. just take this letter to him. You need something in another, sector of the economy, or go to that senator, just mention my name. So they want not only the money, the knowledge that is taught, but also the community that is available. So they will pay what is required. Yet, sorry, I should stop using they. So we will pay whatever is required. But when it comes to knowledge of the deen, we all say that we rate it incomparably higher than the knowledge of the dunya. But we do not send our kids to the best of the schools of knowledge. No, we don't. We don't wake our kids up before the cock crows to prepare them for the school of knowledge of the deen. We don't. They go for the dunya first. When they are tired, when they return, then we hire somebody to come and teach them in the comfort of their house. We pay for the worldly knowledge far more. We borrow money in order, when things are tight, we borrow money to pay their school fees. We never do that with respect to knowledge of the deen. If things are tight, there's no money. Afar, come back next month if there's money. Or we even owe him and we don't pay. So this is what we do. Let's look in our libraries. How many books of the worldly affairs do we have? How many books of the deen do we have? Whether it's soft copies, whether it is hard copies, let's ask ourselves, how many of them have we acquired with money? The one for deen, the one for dunya. And begin to now assess our claim that knowledge of the deen is more precious to us than more knowledge of the dunya. Let us make no mistake. We have to also invest in acquiring knowledge of the dunya, whether it is to benefit ourselves or to counter the enemy. So Allah commanded us, وَاسْتَعِيدُوا لَهُمْ, and prepare against them, i.e. the enemies. So in whatever field that will aid us personally and that will protect us from the enemies and will advance us above the enemies, we also need to invest in that. However, the investment that we make for the akhirah should be far above that which we make for this transient world. And we will now also see that there's a direct link in the investment that we make towards acquiring knowledge and the community. I didn't mention the community with respect to the deen. You now see also that we also are careful in sending our children to a school that has a community of people that are not in our class, even when their practice of the deen is solid. In fact, that is the main thing that pushes us away at times. So, that's that school, many of the children, girls, 8 years old, 6 years old, they're already wearing niqab. I don't want you to be that hard in your whatever, just put on your hijab the way it is. It's okay. People that will create the community that will be able to rely on, that when you are around them, practicing the deen would be easy. Just like those ones chose community, such a dunya community, such that when they want to get anything of the dunya, it's easy. They just remember, oh, my friend, my classmate, so and so is here. Let me give him a call. He'll make things easy. Bi-idhnillah. In this also, other ones, the deen. Oh, if I need this in the deen, these are the people I'll call on to. So what we want rather is people who are in our minds well balanced, not these, extremes. So our point of balance is different from the point of balance of the deen. So now we now see that there is a direct link between what we invest in knowledge seeking, what we invest in community seeking, and what we do in terms of practice of the deen. That which you didn't invest much in acquiring, you won't practice much of it. You won't practice much of it. So for all of us, we ask ourselves, how much then of the Quran have we memorized? How much then of the Hadith have we memorized? How much then of acts of ibadah do we do? Apart from the 5 daily prayers, fasting in Ramadan and all that are compulsory, how much other things that are mustahab do we do? You see that there's a direct correlation between what we invested and what we are using, what we acquire through those investments, what we are practicing out of them. So this is from the perspective of those who utilize the knowledge. The wa'adh for you and I is to invest. We are not investing in anything other than our own selves and our hereafter. Because as you invest, so shall you practice. As you invest, so shall you practice. And you will only invest based on your true value, the true value in your heart for that thing, not what you say. On the other side, those who give. The scholars of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah are not people who go copying or cap in hand. You dishonor the knowledge that you have when you go cap in hand, asking the people for money. It is taken for granted that you have debased yourself. It is taken for granted. We are not talking about loans. The Prophet ﷺ had loan. In fact, he took a loan and stood with it, with his whatever, with his war shield. And it was Abu Bakr that ransomed it back after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. He took the loan from a Jew. So we are talking about you asking for gifts, handouts. When you do that, you have debased yourself. And because you are tied to the deen, you will have, by that, soiled the deen and the knowledge that you hold by that. People will not value you. People will not value you. There will be no weight to what you are saying or doing or telling them to do. It won't enter their ears, not to talk of entering from one ear and coming out of the other. Because there's no value to you. There's no value to you. One of my teachers, Malam Ahmed Tijani, he said he went to, he was taught by don't let me mention the person's name. It was taught by one of the popular, people down southwest. So that one went to MKO Abiola's house with some of his students on an invitation. And he asked them, what are you going to eat and everything like that? So no, we're okay. When they left, and they were at the bus stop waiting for a cab to take them, told the students, we're hungry, what are we going to eat today? They were hungry when they were there. But your hunger as somebody who has knowledge with you is not to be displayed in the house of a wealthy person. Your value would diminish rapidly, faster than the force of gravity will pull down a stone that's thrown into the air. And this is something that the scholars used to warn against. Sitting at the doorsteps of the wealthy. So you value yourself. Equip yourself with a source of income. Equip yourself with a source of income. And that includes setting up a school, a class, and charging for your time that you're investing in teaching people. Let the people who value it come. Let the people who don't value it look for other alternatives. There are a lot of alternatives. Those who are willing to pay for your service, your knowledge, will come and pay for it. They'll come and pay for it. In between, there are people who get it. That this, there's a lot of things that we are missing. And those are people who fill the gap. Who say, Ustaz, you've been teaching us, this thing, and we are not paying, school fees. We demand that we pay school fees. We are not giving you a gift, though. We are rewarding you for your time. We are valuing your time as this compared to what we also pay people whose time we take and whose knowledge we take in other fields. And based on that, this is our school fees. We have talked amongst ourselves and we have employed a class captain or whatever who will be giving the money to. And these are the rules that we have set, that the class captain will not allow anybody in class if the money is not paid by this time. And we are not asking for your this thing. We'll just be we are not asking whether you accept it or not. We are just going to be deducting it, depositing it into your account. So you don't give him a situation to think that you are giving him a gift or anything like that. No. If you value the knowledge, you will do that. Imam Malik, he didn't have any, thing that he was doing apart from teaching the knowledge. But his peers who are wealthy, who are also scholars, they told him, don't do anything other than what you're doing. They supply these means. These were people who are filling the gap. The garments you will need for a year, the money you will need for a year and things like that, they did that. You had people like Imam al-Bukhari, Imam Muslim, stupendously rich people who betook themselves to knowledge and not only had more than enough to fund their own travels and needs in the field of knowledge, but also sponsored other people. They filled the gap. So this is for you and I to see what we'll do. If we are acquiring knowledge somewhere, how are we valuing that knowledge and paying for it? If you are given knowledge somewhere, how are we protecting the dignity of that knowledge by not going cap in hand? And if we have the opportunity to fill in the gap by educating the people on both sides of what they ought to be doing and creating opportunities for correcting that situation where knowledge will be preserved, then we should do that. And we should not be, if we are not doing this, then we should not be alarmed that people who are not worth their salt are those that are parading themselves as people of knowledge. Because people who are worth their salt see that, look, I'm going to be answerable first, primarily for myself and the members of my household. I have time to do that. The other time, I'll go and sit down doing a job somewhere and earn a living for myself. Because if I were to invest it on people that I will not be primarily answerable to, I'll die of hunger. And that is what you see. That you see people coming out with PhDs from University of Medina and things like that. When they go back to their community or their communities, they will learn what's up. And they will see that, subhanAllah, the people don't value our time or the knowledge. So you start seeing them in white-collar jobs. You start seeing them, running businesses of their own and having just very little time to teach the deen. That is one of the ways that we all contribute as a community towards the loss of knowledge. So this person, a mountain of knowledge, dies and nobody has taken anything tangible from his wealth of knowledge. So the adhan has been called. We'll stop here. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakumullah khair.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. جزاكم الله خير يا شيخ.
Wa alaikum.